You do this more than I.
MGM National Harbor. My name is Melanie Johnson, and I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer for this fabulous property that we all love and we're so proud of. As a member of the Greater Washington Board of Trade, this conversation matters to me, both as a business leader and as an operator. Few industries feel the cost and reliability of energy as directly as hospitality and gaming do. The lights, the climate systems, the technology, our guests and team members rely on every day. Energy isn't an abstract policy conversation for us. It's core to how we operate every single day. And I'd like to share a few things that we're doing to make a contribution to our energy conservation. With the use of our cogeneration system, we've reduced our kilowatt hour usage by 15% year over year. This system provides on-site power and exhaust heat, which is used for both domestic hot water and drives an absorption chiller to cool the building. We've also incorporated an LED lighting system with Crestron controls throughout the resort. This delivers energy savings with improved comfort for our guests. The system provides several benefits: dimming and daylight harvesting, peak load shedding, occupancy sensors, and dusk to dawn sensors. We've also, in our guest hotel rooms, we're equipped with INCOM thermostat system that regulates temperature settings based upon occupancy. The energy efficient system supports reducing our HVAC runtime in unrented spaces with an increase in savings of 15 to 20%. We also have a cistern system. Very proud of this. This is our reclaimed water system. It's a 700,000 gallon tank that supports our water preservation efforts. The system provides rainwater for irrigation, flushing, and a cooling tower system, along with native plants between the resort and the Potomac River to reduce runoff. The property has reclaimed, we're really proud of this, and repurposed over 60 million gallons of water within a 3-year period, which is huge. That's part of why we're proud to step up as host and sponsor today's Regional Energy Outlook. This is exactly the kind of conversation the business community needs to be having. And we wanted to make sure it happened somewhere in our where our region leaders could get grounded in the facts and get to work. Now I have a quick few thank yous. The first goes out to Jack McDougall and the entire Board of Trade team for building such a strong program and for the partnership on this event. And to our speakers and panelists joining us today, and to all of you for taking times out of your busy schedule to join this great conversation. And last but not least, I would be remiss for not thanking my team members. I don't make this happen. My team members are what makes the magic happen at MGM National Harbor to take care of each other and our guests on a daily basis. And now it's time, and it's my pleasure to introduce Jack McDougall, President and CEO of the Greater Washington Board of Trade, to open this morning's conversation. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Melanie mentioned, my name is Jack McDougall, and I'm President and CEO of the Greater Washington Board of Trade. And welcome to our Regional Energy Outlook today. Thank you all for taking time, for being here, and glad that the air conditioning is working because we're going to hit another triple-digit day, right? Tyler, you're going to tell us a little bit more about that later? All right, great. But before we start, again, I want to thank Melanie and her team for hosting and sponsoring us today. Just a fabulous facility and just really great to work with your team and to bring these conversations together, so thank you. Again, also to our speakers and panelists, my team as well, Jackie, and everyone. Forgive me a little bit. There's smoke in the air now, I guess, from the Ottawa fires, and so I've been finding every once in a while I get a little froggy in the throat. And then also really pleased that Governor Moore is going to join us in a few minutes too to share some of his perspectives on how we're dealing with energy in Maryland, so that's great. So as we know, energy covers a lot of ground, but today we're going to focus on electricity, and so you'll hear us sometimes talk about power, energy, but we're really talking about electricity today. So I just kind of wanted to set the stakes around that. You know, and most of us, we don't think a lot about electricity until the lights go out, the air conditioning goes off, or when the bill shows up. So it's really prevalent now too, especially as we're talking about affordability and other issues. So a really critical time to have this conversation. And because especially behind the scenes, and one of the important parts of this conversation is that electricity is a very complex system that has been built over decades. It powers virtually every aspect of our lives. And so if we're going to figure out solutions and how we're going to meet our future demand, it's really important that we all have a shared understanding of what are the dynamics that are affecting this system. And oftentimes, and I know this is shocking, but the headlines aren't necessarily informing us about what all those dynamics are. So we need to dig a little deeper and we need to figure out what's happening. Because we know as demand continues to grow, and this is across every sector, the question for us is no longer whether we need more, we do. But how is it that we can ensure that energy remains affordable, reliable, sustainable, while we make the investments that we need to power our future? So this morning isn't about talking. We talk a lot. Talking's important, but it's really about action. And very interested in Ann Kadamian's panel that's going to come up because they're going to be talking about some really interesting solutions that they're exploring. And so that's really going to be very interesting. And how do we continue to figure out actions across the board? How are we going to address these issues to meet the challenges ahead? So here's what we're going to do this morning. Willie Phillips is going to frame the regional energy landscape for us. Tyler is going to provide an eye-opening and provocative look at some of the challenges that they have to deal with to make sure that the lights and air conditioning do stay on. Then we'll hear from Ann and her folks, and then Governor Moore and I will have a conversation about energy across the region. So again, thank you so much for being here today. Really do appreciate it. And with that, please join me in welcoming Willie Phillips. He's currently a partner at Holland & Knight and is the immediate past chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So thank you. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
All right. Hello, everybody. All right. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, Jack, for that introduction. Thank you for those words. You pretty much said most of what there is to say, but I'm going to add a little bit to what you said today. It's so good to be with everybody. Let me tell you this. I have a bit of a confession. I am obsessed. I'm obsessed with the future. And when you hear people talk about America's energy future, they often do start with electricity. And I think that they can be forgiven for that. That is a rightful place to start, as Jack said. But I want today to start the conversation somewhere else. I want to start the conversation with infrastructure. Now, America and in our region, we've never become more competitive, more economically competitive, because we built less energy infrastructure. Indeed, I will tell you that I submit that we are a nation of builders. You know, me and my friends from law school, I went to Howard for law school, like HU. You can always say that to get a line in DC, right? We have this thing that we say to each other. Anytime we talk, anytime we're on text or email, we always say, we end it with, do big things. Do big things. And that's what I believe America does. We do big things. We build big things. Think the Erie Canal, right? Think the transcontinental railroads. Think the interstate highway system. Each one of these visionary infrastructure projects, when they were built and still to this day, they continue to shape the regional, the national, and the global economy. The reason why I'm going this long way and wind up to get started today is because I submit to you that we are at a similar inflection point when it comes to the electric grid here in this country, and in particular in this region. And I think we have an opportunity. Now, if you stop and you think for a minute about the energy policy discussions that we've been having here in Washington and around the region and around the country, there's been a shift. And you can feel the shift. You can feel it, and it goes back. It started back around 2021 with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And while that terrible, the human toll of that war is terrible, and it continues on today, the impact that that conflict had at the time on our energy policy, it was tremendous. Everybody was talking about it at the time. But it feels like a blip when you think about the conflict that's happening around the world today. When you think about what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, and all of the human toll that you have there, but it's impacting us here on the ground in the United States. And at the same time, our energy policy focus at home is changing. And Jack, you mentioned the headlines. We've seen it: artificial intelligence, data centers, electrification, still electric vehicles, the hopeful return of domestic manufacturing, advanced industrial manufacturing, quantum computing. All of these industries are having an impact on our electric grid, but they also have one thing in common, at least one thing in common. And that's that they all depend on reliable, abundant, and affordable electricity. But at the same time, we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of things we can talk about. We can talk about climate change. We can talk about the fact that our planning system takes too long. It still takes a decade or more to build a transmission line in this country. That's unacceptable. Interconnection queues around the country, they continue to grow, or at least they're not going down fast enough to keep pace. I mean, when you think about permitting something in this country right now, it can take years just to get something sited. When we know the demand that we have and we know what we need to do in order to meet the moment. And look, I want to give some credit to our local regulators, our state regulators, and to our federal regulators. It's not like they aren't doing whatever they can to try to speed up the process, to streamline permitting, to streamline our planning processes. I want to give them credit, and I hope that I was a part of trying to make that happen. But the truth of the matter is, we have a 21st century economy that we are having it rely on a planning process for a 20th century economy that just hasn't kept pace. And when you think about this gap in where we are and where we need to go, it reminds me of another point in history. And that point is back in the 1950s. We had President Dwight Eisenhower at the time, and he was facing something that should feel familiar to you today. He had a transportation system that did not keep up with his growing post-war economy. Now, they had roads. Roads existed, right? They were a thing, and they were building roads. But those roads were inconsistent. They were often dangerous. They simply were not what we needed for that modern economy at the time. So the president had a choice. He could just invest in what they were already doing and keep doing that, or he could do something visionary. And he decided that he would champion an interstate highway system. Now, it wasn't the popular thing at the time. At the time, folks told him, the states are never going to go for this. They don't trust you, and they were more powerful then than they are today. Local communities, they feared the worst. Everybody said it's going to cost too much, right? We hear that all the time. But now think about it for a second. Think about if we didn't have I-95 that you could jump on to go to New York, go all the way down to Miami. Think about what Eisenhower delivered to our country is one of the greatest energy and transportation infrastructure projects in modern history. And if the interstate highway system is the backbone of our American economy, and I believe since we are the global leader, it's a part of the global economy, then the electric grid is the nervous system for our economy. Some very wise person once said that the electric delivery system, that it is 7% of our economy, but it is the first 7% of our economy. You know, the lights went off at my home. I live in Navy Yard, very close to Capitol Hill. And our system is part of the old city. Tyler, you know this. Lindsay, you know this. It's underground. And my children are still kind of young. They're like preteens. And it dawned on me, I don't think they had ever experienced an outage in our home. And we've lived there for 17 years. Can you say that again? Say, you know what? You just keep it on the loop, Tyler. Keep it on the loop. They had never experienced an outage. And I'm sure this was not your fault, right? This was construction or something like that. But it was so funny to watch them for only about an hour or so go around the house and flip switches that were turning on nothing. Because it is the most unexpected thing when the power does go out. That's how reliable our utilities are. That's what Good Job, Pepco, and Washington Gas, and all of the utilities are doing around this region. So I say all that to say I think we're at a similar point when it comes to our electric grid, that we need leadership, we need a plan. If we're going to have this new AI economy, and it's so important to everything that we do here in the region and around the country, then I think we have to treat it as such. We have to treat it like it is a national asset and realize that it's not just electricity. We're also talking about national security. Now, I've had the privilege of serving as both a state and federal energy regulator. And today in private practice, I advise utility companies, stakeholders, technology companies all across the board on how to navigate that regulatory process. And here's what I know from having looked at these issues from all sides. There's no one entity, no one organization that can solve all the challenges that we face in the energy system here in the region. There's no one utility, there's no one technology company, no one developer, and certainly no one regulator who can address all the challenges we have. But if we work together, perhaps regional collaboration is more important today than it has ever been when it comes to energy policy. And so, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I'm gonna let you in on a secret. The grid doesn't care either. When there's a reliability event, it pays no attention to our political and jurisdictional lines. It can jump right over the Maryland border and come right here to DC. When it comes to what Americans care about right now, what they care most about increasingly when you watch the news, people care that when they need power, that power is going to show up. And so the question we have to answer is, how do we do it? How do we do it? Okay. Let me leave you with this thought. I'm gonna answer it, but I'm gonna tell you, I think we can do it. I know that we can do it. I truly believe that we are at the most consequential moment of energy policy history in our lifetimes, okay? The decisions that we make today, they're going to impact the investment decisions that are made around this region. They're going to impact the economy that we have for decades. And how we do it is this. We don't need to focus as much as we do on every single policy discussion that we're having. 50 years from now, no one is going to remember the great line that you laid on your neighbor when you were talking about what President Trump did, okay? In 50 years, no one's gonna remember a single infrastructure project that you worked on, that you supported, and that you were proud of, and you rightfully so were proud of that. But in 50 years, no one's gonna remember that one thing that you did. In 50 years, no one's gonna remember what you were looking at and what was trending on Twitter when you were looking at your phone and not listening to Willie Phillips talk up here on the stage. What they will remember and what they will judge us by is whether or not we had the vision to not only plan an energy delivery system for ourselves, was to plan it for future generations. Now, I believe that we can do this, and I'll tell you why. I believe that we can because I think that our region is uniquely poised. It's uniquely poised to be successful because we have all the ingredients to be successful. When you think about it, we have outstanding utilities. We have fantastic businesses and business leaders. We have world-class universities. We have strong public institutions, political leadership. We have alignment on the fact of where we need to go. We have the Board of Trade that brings us all together in events like this. We have every single thing that we need, but we have to decide that the responsibility to deliver and to get over everything that divides us, that responsibility is each and every one of ours. We have to make it, everybody has to make that individual decision. And if you do that, I do believe that the future is not something that happens to us. It's something that we build. And I believe that we can do big things. And I believe it's time for us to get to work. I thank you so much for your time. I'm now gonna hand it over to my good friend, Tyler Anthony, President and CEO of Pepco, and he gonna give you all a real speech. He gonna do something.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. I got about 3 hours of content that I'm going to try to cover in about 20 minutes. I really appreciate it, Willie, and Melanie, when you were talking about the energy and the way you guys have worked on that and the reductions, congratulations. I think you deserve another round of applause. Thank you. She thought she was going to scoot out, but I grabbed her as she was taking care of important issues. But anyway, I'll start with an introduction, and then I wanna roast Willie a little bit as part of my off-script agenda, and then I'm gonna hit 3 areas for everybody. I'm gonna talk a little bit about an education of what defining the problem and why our electric bills are so high in capacity, and then I'm gonna move to a little bit of a conversation about your current electric bill and what makes that up. And then probably the most important slide I'll cover is, it's one thing for me to stand up here as the CEO and president of Pepco Holdings that delivers your energy, but to stand up here and say, well, that's those independent power producers that have created this problem. We all need to be mad at them, or we need to be mad at PJM. I don't think that wins the day. So my last slide is going to be about what we're doing about the problem collectively. Okay, so to start, a couple things. One, I do want to acknowledge Jack, Ashley, Jessica, Board of Trade folks. One of the things I'm very proud to serve right now as the chair of the Board of Trade. And when you make decisions about where you spend your time, it was clear to me that what I like about the Board of Trade is they bring us collectively to real discussions on the real challenges facing our area. And this is one of the biggest, in my opinion. And I think the fact that the Board of Trade convenes us is important. And the content for today is important. But more importantly, the connections like I made here already the first hour I'm here. I think, Jack, I built 2 nuclear plants while I was out getting a coffee this morning. But point being is, Willie talked about partnerships and the collective importance of partnerships. And I'd argue what makes partnerships successful, frankly, is a level of trust. And the only way you establish a level of trust, and you see the camaraderie in here amongst all of you, is the fact that when you spend time together, we move into respecting each other. And then after respect, we move to trust. And collectively in partnerships, when you have trust, there's nothing we can't accomplish. Okay, and I wanted to give a shout out. I got a couple big shots for Pepco in the room today. I have Amber Perry, the regional president for Pepco. And I also have Valencia McClure. She's the Government Regulatory External Affairs Senior Vice President for both PEPCO and BG&E. So thank you guys both for being here. Okay, and I have Ann Clace. I got some of our biggest rock stars. So when you guys get opportunities, please do introductions. But really quick, a story about Willie. So I've been at PEPCO now for 10 years. I was running Chicago and Northern Illinois. I've been running Chicago and Northern Illinois' electric system before I got asked to come out here as part of the 2016 merger where Exelon purchased PEPCO Holdings. I came out as the lead for the transition. And a quick show of hands, excuse me, how many people in here have been living in this area for greater than 10 years? Greater than 10 years. Wow, okay. What a great area. You guys don't decide to stay. But the reason I asked that is, and this is going to be my Willie story, is the fact that back in 2016, 2014, 2016, PEPCO Holdings was in some cases rated the worst utility in the United States, and some publications, business journals, and some others had us the worst company in the United States. Does anybody remember when the lights didn't stay on? So, you know, Willie came in as the Washington, D.C. chair of the Utility Commission. It was right around the time that I had just arrived. In my first few months here, we knocked out the Federal Reserve for 2 weeks. We had a series of hotel groups that were out of power downtown. And I remember saying to my wife as we moved out from Chicago, I said, "Hun," I said, "how are those 529 plans doing? Because I may not make it here very long." So and the reason I bring up Willie, so Willie was the chair of the commission, and we had a significant substation event in July at a substation we refer to as Florida Avenue. In the hottest month of July, we had a major fire transformer event, and we took 20,000 DC residents out of power for almost a week in a hot July week, okay? So fast forward, you know, and I come on board, I'm coming from Chicago, we're trying to figure out, okay, what investments are we gonna do and how are we gonna dig ourselves out of this poor performance? So I go to a hearing. It's a hearing that I'm going in front of Willie and the commission to talk about the Florida Avenue event and what in the heck happened that we had, because it gets very serious. That substation feeds several hospitals. Like when you think about power, you know, power is responsible for 5% of the GDP in this country, but I'd argue it enables the other 95% of the GDP. So there I am testifying about what happened. You know, I had been there a short period of time, and I'm talking about what happened, and I'll never forget what Willie said to me when I was done my testimony. He said to me, he said, "Tyler," he said, "you're our utility. What can this commission do to help you?" And that's a true statement. You probably don't remember it, Willie. I get a little choked up about it because it was right then that I said, we're going to go far. So under his leadership and that trust and partnership, fast forward, last year PEPCO Holdings was #2 in the country for reliability. So thank you for your partnership, Willie. I could talk about FERC and the different leadership positions you've had there, but it's an honor always to share the stage with you. Okay. So I'm gonna go into the first slide. I'm gonna shape up the problem right now. So what I'll start with is a little bit of an education. The United States is broken up into 7 what we call RTOs, Regional Transmission Operators. We are a part of a regional transmission operator known as PJM. It essentially takes care of 13 states and 65 million Americans. That PJM RTO basically takes the power plants and delivers it through the lines that we maintain and those other 13 states to provide electricity for the consumer, okay? The way they set pricing on that is through an annual auction. Set the stage a little bit for that annual auction. 3 years ago, you pay for that in what they form as what they call it a megawatt day. 3 years ago, we were paying about $27, $29 a megawatt day. Currently paying $331, over 1,000% increase. Later on, you'll be hearing from Governor Moore and Jack. Governor Moore, in combination with Governor Shapiro and some others, created policy with PJM to put a cap on the top side of that market in PJM that set the price at $330. And without that cap, it would have been closer to 500. So think about that, 500 from 30, okay? So what we'll talk about is, we'll talk about, start from the left, increased demand. The best example of that is just last week. This PJM, I'll talk in the terms of gigawatts. A gigawatt can feed about 800,000 homes. Last week, the PJM, 13 states, we used 162 gigawatts of energy to get through that week. It was a 10-year high max that we've ever had. The reason that's important, and I'll give you an analogy similar to a Costco parking lot. Costco parking lot has 500 spaces in it. Monday, 50 cars, Tuesday, 60 cars, Thursday, 10 cars, but Saturday morning, you need all 500 spaces. So we have to build the grid similarly for the 500 spaces. Okay, so when you hear about that demand at 162 gigawatts, we got to build a system that when we're all needing it the most, it can handle that. Okay, so the demand last week was that significant. The PJM also likes to operate with what we call a 20% reserve. They like 20% extra in case a power plant trips off, a line comes down. So for July week, that 162, we only had 5 gigawatts of excess capacity. We were essentially on the borderline of brownouts, rolling brownouts to major cities within that PJM footprint. Only 2 things saved us. One was they mandatorily told these data centers, you have to run your backup generation, and we had what we call demand response programs that asked users to curtail how much energy they were using. Without those 2 vehicles and with that margin, we are essentially out of power in our area, okay? I'm not trying to draw like this gloom and doom situation. I'm just trying to share some of the facts of the problem with everyone. Okay, moving across, data center growth. I think Willie said it well. We have to come to grips. You know, I was told this by a large data center developer in the country. The average person that has the cell phone, and we all know our faces are in that thing 3 and 4 hours a day, if not more. Average person that doesn't work behind a computer goes in and out of a data center every day on average 1,000 times. If you have a computer job and you're working technically with a computer all day, average worker that works behind a terminal goes in and out of a data center 10,000 times a day. And then when you think about our country's defense and others, and the fact that we need to onshore this technology for various defense issues, et cetera, we have to figure it out. And unfortunately, in our communities, a lot of vilification to those data centers right now, for good reasons. I mean, there's arguments to both sides, but nonetheless, we have to solve that. And those of you in the room, I don't think we were talking about data centers 3 years ago. So here we are. Okay? Some of those data centers, I talk about a gigawatt being 800,000 people and 162. In some states, we're tripling the current amount of power just through data centers. It's massive. Okay? Data center growth, and then over here, plant retirements. That same PJM footprint, we have a lot of old fossil clunkers in PJM, a lot of coal plants. So since 2013 to today, we've retired about 40 gigawatts of power, and another 25 gigawatts are set to retire by 2030. So not only are we using a lot more because of us, heat, et cetera, then we have data centers, and now we're taking off the grid a lot of power. Few local examples. We took the last power plants off in the state of New Jersey in 2015 in Logan and Chambers. Last year in the state of Delaware, we took off Indian River, and in Maryland, they just announced the closing of Brandon Shores. And for those of us that live in the district, the 2 power plants there have been shut down many years ago. DC imports 100% of its power. New Jersey's about half, Maryland's about half, and Delaware's about half. So the jurisdictions I serve are major importers from other states, which also hits that price demand significantly. Okay, and then last, new generation. I'm a big all of the above requirement kind of guy. Big all of the above. What occurred over time is the generation came off, demand went up, and we were very committed to renewables. and renewables are great. However, they can't get enough and come on fast enough even to replace those big coal plants that shut down. So you can see the perfect storm. You can see the perfect storm. We'll go to the next slide. So now, what does the outcome of that? I'll talk about it in financial terms, and then I'm going to talk about it in reliability terms. And I hit that a little bit when you think about that reserve margin. Okay, so PJM in the last few days here just had their last auction, and remember I said they like to keep that 20% reserve. So PJM goes out to all the independent power producers and says, I need X gigawatts. They fell short. They were only able to get about a 14% cushion. So we don't even have enough power plants running today to keep a reserve margin that's deemed reasonable in our PJM footprint. But now you can take a look at the dollar bill behind me. And so when you're paying that electric bill, and and I talked about trust, and I think one of the things that sincerely bothers me on a daily basis is we spent 10 years building trust with our PEPCO customers, with you all, with businesses, not only in what we did on outcomes, but who we did it with, how we did it. We put a lot of heart into this. But these bills have eroded that trust significantly. And as you guys see in the press and all, we're like the bad guys. Because I give you the bill. Many people don't even fully appreciate supply and what are you talking. All I care about, Tyler, is my $150 bill is $300 and I can't afford it. Real issues out there. So you can take a look behind me. It's pretty self-explanatory. But when you think about that dollar, every dollar you pay on your bill, from the transmission and the surcharges, I'm getting about, what you can just do the math there, 33-ish cents on that electric bill. And you can see how much of it is on those independent power producers. Okay? So, continuing on, I'll close. I'm going to spend my last portion of my time on this next slide. And what you'll see here is, so Tyler, what can you do about it as a wires business? What are you doing in order to try to help the situation that we're in? And there's really 4 key areas that we're compelled to. I work for Calvin Butler, the CEO of Exelon, and I'll tell you, we're lucky we're lucky that he's running our company because of what we'll call our Exelon promise. That says our customers depend on us. So whether or not it's our direct responsibility or not, we're going to make a difference. So as I talk about this slide in the 4 areas, I want you to think about the Exelon promise. Let's start first, adding new power to the grid. You'd say, well, Tyler, you don't own power plants at all. Well, what we're trying to do on solar, we have, in the jurisdictions I'm responsible for, remember 1 gig, 800,000 homes, we have 2 gigawatts of installed solar. We have another gigawatt in construction, and my job with those developers is when they say, I want to come to Prince George's, or I want to come to Montgomery, or I'm in DC, our job is to roll the red carpet out and connect all that stuff the best we can and as quick as we can so those developers want to build that solar here. First one. Second one, battery storage. I talked about that parking lot. See, we are also committed that some large battery systems can take that energy. Like you heard all that solar, we're getting less than 20-25% benefit of that solar because the sun is big at 1, but at 5, when you guys are all home drinking your cold wine and turning on the air, it doesn't line up. So we can install large battery systems that can literally shave off, remember, when the parking lot gets full, I can shave off parking spots to save over $100 million in cases of some certain battery systems depending on we located it. So right now, we're aggressively saying, we'll build these battery systems and let's see what we can do to drive these bills down. And what I like about battery systems is this is a 1 to 3 year with the appropriate approvals to get it done. Okay? Next one, constructing large power plants. So Calvin Butler has been clear with us as leaders of the company that if these independent companies won't build power plants, we will. We don't want to build them. We're not in the business of building them, but we're not going to sit here and just keep meandering the issue about resource adequacy, that if a state or a jurisdiction wants us to build a power plant, we'll build it well, we'll build it cheaper, and we'll do it. And there's an argument, does that leverage? Because the independent guys, if there are any in the room, like I know you don't like us about that. but it's just about we got to get moving. We got to stop talking. Listen to what I just said about last week. Okay? All right, and continuing on, I'll move to, I'm going to move down to the left. Utility operational excellence. You know, I bragged a little bit about the reliability. The real question for myself and the other Pepco employees in the room is, how do I keep that same reliability, number 2 in the country, and how do I do it for 20% less cost? That's the new challenge. I gotta drive my cost out of my business. Now, I'm an operator by trade, nuclear engineer by background, and I will tell you, if it's up to Tyler, I'm freaking replacing everything, okay? That's just my demeanor. But you wouldn't want my electric bill, but you have one hell of a system. I'm a nuclear engineer by profession. Now, I share that because, now imagine you're sitting there and you're in our shoes and you have a substation that's 100 years old and it's $300 million to replace. Or you got a transformer, a large transformer feeding some critical area downtown that's 40 years old, but it's $3 million. You're always asking yourself, can I get another 2 years out of that baby? Let's go put a little bit of wax on it. Let's see if we can, change that oil again. But these are the issues we're facing. And what I worry about, because today's top 3 priorities in my world is affordability, affordability, affordability. And I don't want to go back to my pre-Willie days. I don't want to go back to that. And there's balance in everything, but we have to be careful, okay? And then anything else on there? Oh, demand response, talked about that a little bit, where we have, demand response is basically where we ask you guys, hey, on that hot August day, can you take that air conditioning from 72 and maybe bump it up to 78 for us for that 4 or 5 hours? Can anyone be a part and help us with that? And we'll give you some dollars off on your bill to help us with demand response. And then this last one, which I'm spending a lot of time in, is what can I do with the current grid and stuff that customers paid for and get more out of it? Where you don't spend another dollar, but you hold me accountable to get more out of it. As an example, technology. The little meter sits on the side of your house. There's technology now where they're loading apps into these meters to help you manage your electric bill, help me that I don't have to drive trucks for line voltages and low voltage faults and different things. But bottom line is, how do I get more out of the existing things that you all have paid for? Okay? Then I move over to customer support, number 3 here. We created a new bill design. I was told a stat that depressed me the other day. The average person in here looks at your electric bill and deals with us as a company on average 12 minutes a year. I want you guys to increase that. All right, just think about that. 12 minutes a year you give us, and we're one of the most critical assets we do for you. It's just because, I think Willie pointed out, the lights come on most of the time. It's one thing you hopefully don't have to worry about, okay? But my account, if any of you are signed up for that, I'll tell you what you're spending by day. I'll be like that email in there ooh, how am I doing against my neighbors? Oh, you spent $14 today. Because the best kilowatt, and I was giving Melanie some credit, is one we don't use. The one we don't use is the best one, okay? And then customer relief fund. This was Calvin saying, you know what? It's not our issue, but we're going to take shareholder dollars, about 60 million of it, and we're just going to give it to customers that are struggling. Let's do it through nonprofits, and let's just help, because customers are struggling. That was our customer relief fund. And then last, regulatory and legislatively, I can't say enough about Governor Moore. One of the reasons I think Jack, good relationship, he's going to be on stage, is because he's active in this. Best compliments I could give Governor Moore is, I've been in his office no less than 4 times under one question. What can we do together to make this better? You see some of the programs I listed up there. The most recent one is for low to moderate income, we're doing a program as a function of your total earnings your energy bill to never be more than 6% of what you make. That's all Governor Moore leadership, a lot of stuff there. And then I'll give you one in here, DC again, as I turn and look at Willie. DC Solar for All. Best way to help low income, think about if they're a portion of solar getting benefits every month. I think DC's program might be one of the best in the country where a portion of solar installations are earmarked for low income, and it has reduced bills in some cases for low income up to 50% a month. Okay, so I'll close with this and summarize. Big picture. What are you doing to get more supply? What are you doing with the existing grid and managing your own costs? What are you doing around customer and education and getting them involved? And then lastly, how are you working with your stakeholders to create policy that helps drive the right behaviors? One of the things that frustrates me personally the most is when you think about that cost from 29 to 330, customers have gotten zero for that money. Customers have gotten zero. We didn't build 10 power plants. We didn't do X, Y, and Z. Customers are paying all that money and not getting a dollar of benefit, and that's wrong. Okay? So with that, I want to end on a high note. Commander Stadium, I can talk about all kind of great stuff, but let me introduce the panel. Was that interesting, guys? I'm looking around. I hope I didn't bore you guys. You can clap a lot. You guys can clap a lot. I'm teasing. All right, so let's talk about the panel. But I hope it was helpful. I wanted to kind of give you guys a landscape because I think it sets up our panel's phenomenal. All right, I'm gonna do a little bit of introductions, and then what I'll do is I'll introduce them all, and then I'll ask them all to come up. But our moderator, Ann Kadamian, the director of University of Shady Grove, I got to talk to Ann. I know she's in here somewhere, but phenomenal. I think you're going to enjoy her as our moderator. I have Carol Lane, SVP of Government Affairs, X-Energy. They're doing some groundbreaking work. You're going to enjoy hearing about that. And then I have Al Marie Zani, Power and Energy Center from Virginia Tech. He's the director there. Great up here. And then rounding it out will be Bob Mazzi, co-founder of FlexNode. So please welcome the panel up here, and we'll get into a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
Tyler, great to meet you.
Any word you're writing, go ahead.
Thank you.
Here's Bob. Okay. While we're getting situated, I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much to the Board of Trade for this opportunity. Thank you, Jack and George and Jackie and everyone for bringing us together on this topic. And I want to thank Willie and Tyler both for great overviews, great introduction. I tell you, my favorite piece of mail to get is the one that compares my energy uses to my neighbor's energy use, right? See how well I'm doing.
Always worse than them. That's why it's
Yeah, it's a little competitive. It's a little competitive. It's great. As Tyler said, my name's Ann Kadimian. I'm the executive director at the universities at Shady Grove. We're part of the university system of Maryland. So we spend a lot of time thinking about talent development, strategic talent development, and how we can better align with the workforce needs of our region and our state and meet that talent demand, because we believe talent development drives economic development. It's also a huge part of energy and what we're doing here as well. We also spend a lot of time thinking about how we can help the system be more effective and more synergistic. So questions around data centers and compute powers and these things are very central to what we're doing. We have a great panel here today to talk about where we go from here. Some very creative thinkers and doers. I loved it that Tyler said, let's start doing things. Let's stop thinking about it and let's do it. Let's build and do and create what we need to do. And I love it that Willie challenged us to be visionary and to think big and to do some big things as well. And I think you'll hear some big things here today on our panel. So I'm going to ask each of our panel members to introduce themselves briefly and take just a minute to tell us what is the biggest shift that's happening right now, the headline, in energy today that's a little bit different. And then we'll dig into that a little bit more as well. So, Bob, why don't you start?
Thank you, Ann. Thank you for having me. This is fun, I have to say. We're seeing a seminal change in the provision of electricity and the emergence, obviously, of AI. I am a co-founder of a company called FlexNode, which we started in 2020 to deal with the sustainability issues and the growing demand for data centers. Of course, AI wasn't in most people, virtually anybody here, AI was not in their lexicon on a daily basis. Come 2022, OpenAI announced ChatGPT, and the world changed. And we jumped onto that horse and started running, and it continues to change exponentially, almost daily. And as much as we know, there's a lot more that we don't know, and we're going to see emerge over time. So I'm just, at this point, I love the fact that Ann is out there and Jack trying to educate everybody, because nobody really has a firm grip on what's about to happen or what is happening, and it'll change. And we all need to understand that. So with that,
Well, what do you think is the biggest shift that's happening that everyone needs to be aware of?
everybody, the biggest shift, and I can get into this later, right now, is what we're reading, all the news articles and so forth, are about the large language model data centers, the 1 gigawatts that I'm sure, every power company is trying to figure out how to provide. What we do, and what I think is happening, is shift to inference. And that's when we'll really get, particularly businesses, will get their hands and be able to use the efficiency of AI. And inference has its own set of issues, but it does not need 1 gigawatt. And that's why you see in these legislations like the one, the moratorium New York just passed, there's an exemption for anything 20 megawatts and below. And that is because 20 megawatts and below is inference, and it doesn't need those giant data centers. What it does need is, it needs to be close to the source of use with very little latency, and it needs to be highly reliable and secure. But it's a different issue. I think one of the things that I can come here and just say, one of the things to understand is there are different kinds of demands on this market, and some they all have different challenges.
So we'll talk more about that as we go along.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Carol.
Hey, good morning, and thanks for including me in this panel. So I'm Carol Lane, Senior Vice President of Government Relations for Exet. Whoops, I didn't turn it on.
Let me check mine.
Okay, does that work now? Okay. Carol Lane, Senior Vice President at X Energy for Government Relations. X Energy is an advanced nuclear reactor design and fuel manufacturing company. We're what's called an advanced reactor, next generation reactor, which I can spend a little more time on. But we won our first contract with Department of Energy in 2020. It's a 50-50 partnership to build a first of a kind reactor. We're teamed or partnered with Dow Chemical as well as Department of Energy, and we'll be deploying that first plant down in Cedar, Texas. And what's interesting, and I'll talk more about this later, is that we will provide both electricity and high temperature steam, which really expands the markets that nuclear can feed into. The biggest shift I've seen, and actually I think Willie just articulated it so well this morning, is we've really gone from, keeping the lights on economically and affordably to energy becoming really a strategic enabler, and not just in terms of our consumer lifestyle and all of that within this country, but in AI, domestic manufacturing, onshoring or reshoring of supply chain, and national security. And that shift, I think, is really one of the most fundamental shifts that we're going to see. So we're going from energy being really an operating expense for most people to a strategic advantage or competitive advantage. And I think how we then deploy our assets, how investments are made, and how we look forward in terms of the both state competitions as well as global competitions is really going to be made on the entirety of those decisions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carol. Ali.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ali Meirzisani, and I'm a professor and Bradley Senior Fellow at Virginia Tech. How many of you are a Hokie or have a family member who is a Hokie? or know somebody who is a Hokie. I need to get a lot of hands up. I also direct our Power and Energy Center. I'm a professor of electrical engineering. I work on our power systems, looking at challenges related to integration of renewables, the control, protection, optimization, cybersecurity. We have also been working on, of course, large loads, and a big example of those is data centers, something that's, of course, of everybody's mind today. In terms of what I think about the biggest shift, biggest challenge is, what I would say is, for years, we have been thinking about essentially a power grid or energy transition. What we are experiencing today is more of an energy expansion. So for years, conversation was about, hey, how can we essentially replace some source of our generation from, say, fossil fuels to other sources that are cleaner, more affordable, more reliable, and more sustainable. The challenges that we are seeing today are far more greater. There's, of course, we need way more electricity, way more energy. We need it very fast, we need it very reliable, and we are also dealing, as I said earlier, we are also dealing with just a new breed of loads that they are huge and they have these new characteristics. Thinking about, for example, data centers, their power demands are not constant. So they may use a lot of power at this instant. Next instant, like when interference actually is done, then you may just have just a little bit of energy. To deal with those rapid changes in the amount of power that you draw from the grid, that actually needs a new rethinking of our power system. So we need to think about all the challenges that come with that, the generation side, the transmission side, and of course, a lot of questions about policy, regulation, and talent.
Thank you. Thank you. Is my microphone on?
No.
I don't know. There it goes.
Power saving.
Yeah, power saving. I'm saving those kilowatts. It's on. There it goes. Can you hear me now? Yes. Yeah, okay, fantastic. All right, so let's shift gears from that. I think we'll come back to all the points you've raised about inference, about strategic shifting, about the demand. We'll come back to all of those as we go along. But Carol, let's zoom in and focus on nuclear power, right? A lot of times we think about the energy challenge as a production challenge. But it's a transmission challenge, it's a workforce challenge, it's a permitting challenge, there's all kinds of, it's a public perception challenge as well. So as you look at what it's going to take to make these small modular reactors effective and really be a major contributor to our energy needs and demands, what is it going to take? What are some of the components of this broader ecosystem they're going to have to align in order for this to happen?
So it's kind of interesting. I actually, X Energy was started in 2009. I started there in 2015. There were about 10 of us, and we've just topped 1,000 people. So it's been a huge growth over the past 10 years. And I'll talk about the three things that I think have really come together to make a change. But one of the biggest ones, when we won this contract in 2020, what I saw it as, and I think a lot of people in the company did, is that we were pushing technology. We were trying to get people to understand what the value of new nuclear was, how you can build reactors safer, smaller, more economical, and it was really a technology push. What's changed in the past 18 months to 2 years is it's become a market pull. So that's really made us think about scaling differently in the context of how do we get to market as fast as we can. That being said, it's still difficult to get a first of a kind up and running, and we really won't have new reactors operating till the early 2030s, but we're moving forward, and we're moving forward very quickly, and I think that's really, really positive. So I look at it as policy and politics coming together with the technical status of where SMRs are, and then the financial community. So let me talk about each one really quickly. On the policy side, I would say the Congress has really been what I call policy forward on nuclear energy for the past 5 years. They have passed numerous bills dealing with funding the first-of-a-kind reactors, redoing the framework for regulating nuclear reactors, particularly SMRs, tax incentives, workforce issues, and these have all been done on a bipartisan basis, and they've enacted this legislation. And they really have been ahead of the curve of public policy, public perception, which is, I just think, a really unique political environment to be in. So we've enjoyed support from the end of the Obama administration, first Trump administration, Biden administration, and now this administration has been doing quite a bit. So politically, I think the federal politicians have really been ahead of the state and local entities. So we've also included as part of that, and we recognize this, outreach is a very important thing. Educating people on this is a different kind of nuclear reactor, what its advantages are, which I'll talk about in a second, play a very important role in our being able to deploy, and we really feel we need the social license to be able to get these deployed in a speed that is required by the data centers and hyperscalers and stuff like that. So that's been very critical and has kind of set the environment for us. Technically, SMRs are really not new technology. A lot of the first ones going to market are technologies that have been tried before. They're being downsized, if you will, and we're working on supply chain issues and different ways of deploying them. But so we're not really breaking ground from a technology standpoint, which is a good thing, because we believe these reactors will work when they get to market. We are building a high temperature gas reactor, which means we do not have water in our core. We have high temperature helium in our core, so it can't melt down. Our fuel, I love to bring it with me, is actually these pebbles. About 220,000 of these go into our reactor core. You can think of a school bus turned vertically with these pebbles in it, and then we flow helium gas through the reactor core. That, because of these two features, the safety involved in our fuel, as well as the use of helium and not water in our reactor core, have changed the dynamics of how the Nuclear Regulatory Commission license us from a safety perspective. What that means practically is, to the point you were making, we can co-locate a lot closer than the current fleet of reactors. Our first plant down at Dow, we're building 4 reactors for a plant of 320 megawatts, will be within 1.5 miles of their chemical facility. They're going to power their chemical facility with our high temperature steam, as well as use the electricity for their site, and they'll put some back on the grid. So, you know, we've got more geographic flexibility. We've got safety features that allow us to co-locate closer to the user, which is important. And the key thing, which was also just mentioned, is, you know, for the first time, the reliability that's really needed for data centers is 99.999% reliability. And that is driving, I think, also the use of nuclear power for to meet this infrastructure that we're trying to do. And then finally, I think the financial community has recognized this. We've been out in the commercial markets and have raised over $1 billion, $1.5 billion, and then we just went public in April. So I think there's a broader recognition of these things coming together and looking at how we deploy this kind of technology.
I also just want to, this doesn't work either. I also just want to note, though, how X Energy has had such a powerful vision and has brought so much, excuse the pun, energy to this effort as well. I think others are coalescing around that too, so it's very exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, I've heard you say not all data centers are created equal or the same, right? Mm-hmm. And I wonder if could you share with us what you think some of the misconceptions are about these data centers? Maybe this is where you draw an inference as well. But what some of the opportunities are that it might not be as obvious to us right now.
That's a good question. And it's not obvious generally because we see the headlines, but we don't see actually what's happening. And even the industry is struggling to see what is actually happening. So the headlines we see is they want to build a 1.5 gigawatt facility in Kansas or wherever it is. Who wants, people don't want to live next to a data center. I wouldn't. I'm sure nobody else would. And that's stirring a lot of community backlash. Not to mention that a lot of those big data centers, and historically, they've been using air to cool those data centers. That air actually creates a lot of noise, which is going to get people cranky. But that's the big ones, and there are a lot. But what do the big ones do? They build the models. So if you go out and you see some of these autonomous vehicle testing, they're collecting data to know exactly what that model looks like. And the more data they have, the more reliable those models are. And so they're always seeking more data. That's not what inference is. Inference is using that model to take advantage of the efficiencies it was designed to offer. And that could be autonomous vehicles, or it could be health related. There's sort of a never-ending list of possible applications, but those are inference. And those, as I said before, are 20 megawatts. And they're generally not air-cooled, they're liquid-cooled. Ours is liquid-cooled through a closed-loop system, so we use virtually no water. It just goes around in a circle. So the issue we have for the inference is it needs to be low latency. Because if whatever it is, maybe it's gunshot detection in a city, you need to have that information, or an accident, or traffic. You need to have that information almost instantaneously. So we need to come closer into the urban areas. Luckily, we're able to do that because our size is, say, 30 feet by, say, 20 feet, plus some electrical gear. So it's not impossible to find. And in fact, we're finding a lot of it snuck away like in substations of the utilities. That we've seen utility substations having 20, 30, 40 excess megawatts of power. But you got to dig for it. But if the goal is to be close so you can take advantage of the AI models, then you're going to have to come closer to the city. And that's what I think is the big change that's happening right now. And I think probably right now we're probably seeing 50% large language model data centers and 50% inference. And I think over the next couple years, that'll probably move 60, 40, 70, 30 or something to that effect. And then you're going to see the demand from the enterprise world for those inference capabilities because they want their efficiencies. If you're on a board of directors of a public company and you're seeing, oh, my competitor is already up and operating, they bought their own data center, inference data center, or they're sharing it, or they're leasing capacity. We've just seen the beginning of this. And it's going to have new demands, and those demands, some of them as I said before, we don't know what they are today. But there's going to be a lot. I was lucky enough to go a couple months ago to go out to AstraZeneca's research facility out in Gaithersburg, which was very impressive. And you start looking at biotech. The public good of their goal, which is Lilly's goal and so forth, to cut down the time it takes to commercialize a new medicine, which is probably around approximately 8 years today. They want to cut that down to 4 years. Think of the implications of that from the greater community. And that's exciting.
Thank you so much. Ali, could you talk with us? You raised the other day in our conversation that, why do you think we're building all these data centers? Like, it's not just that people want to build data centers, right? There's a demand for them.
Yeah.
And talk to us a little bit about, from where you sit with your research and the team at Virginia Tech, what are some of the mind shift challenges that we have in terms of getting the public on board with some of the things that have to happen so that we can transform the grid and do this work as well?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And we don't build data centers because we love data centers, right? I mean, if I were making money, maybe, but I'm not, and most of us not. So we build data centers because we actually use the services that those data centers provide. So Friday evenings, probably we do quite a bit of online shopping, right? A lot of our banking is online. Government services are online. We may watch a lot of cat videos, even though we may not actually admit. So all of those actually go through data centers. I think Tyler mentioned that average person, even if you are not sitting in front of a computer, you're going to be in and out of data centers 1,000 times a day. So part of that mindset shift that you mentioned, Anne, is actually happening, or actually happened already. We are relying on services of data centers every day or every minute of the day. What needs to happen is we need to become conscious about it, right? We need to know that how much we are using those data centers. We may not love data centers themselves, right? Bob mentioned he doesn't want to live close to data centers, but somebody has to live close to data centers. Somebody has to have those data centers in the close proximity of where they live. So I would say probably the main mindset shift is for us to maybe stop thinking of data centers as just a facility and start thinking of them as part of our digital infrastructure. Even if we don't like AI, they are part of our digital infrastructure. That's actually part of the modern life already. So, I mean, we talk about our energy delivery infrastructure, we talk about our transportation infrastructure, and data centers are just a part of the modern lives anymore.
Thank you. I'm going to give up on the microphone. I'm just going to talk loud, so use my teaching voice. I want us to kind of bring all of this together now and think about the region as a whole. None of these solutions stand in a vacuum, right? We need workforce to do this work. We need to modernize the grid. We need space. We need collaboration. We need planning. All of these things need a bigger picture. If our region is to actually lead on this and not just react, what are some first steps that we need to take in order to be in the forefront, to make that big move that Willie was challenging us to think about? And Ali, maybe we start with you.
Sure. I just mentioned that we need to start thinking about data centers as part of our infrastructure. And I would also say that part of maybe the first step is actually to start thinking about our digital infrastructure, our energy infrastructure, as part of the broader infrastructure discussion. I mean, there is the electricity, the power grid planning that has to go on. There is the data center siting projects and development project that has to go on. There is, of course, the big question of economic development and what economic development with data centers, with this new sort of infrastructure is going to bring. So what I would say is we need to really think about all of these together. I forgot whether it was Tyler or Willie mentioned the great example of our interstate system. When President Eisenhower was essentially need to think about this, I mean, they could fund individual projects or they could fund a system. And they went the system route. And I would say we need to actually replicate that sort of thinking, that we need to have essentially a system that brings together these multiple infrastructures together. And instead of looking at, again, the big elephant in the room, data centers project by project, maybe we should start looking at them like a housing project, that you prepare sites and then different developers come in and put their homes there.
I totally agree, and just to amplify on that a little bit, I think what's really going to drive some of these, I guess, changes in terms of economic growth is going to be how we think about where we put energy and where we do the development. Because whether you think of it from a state level or a region level or a country level, the investment, the growth, the manufacturing are all going to be done surrounding the data centers and the energy centers. And so, what we're seeing on a state level, while I will say it's kind of interesting. There was an article, it was either in Forbes or Fortune a couple of months ago, and it said people would rather live near nuclear reactors than data centers. And I thought, never in my lifetime did I ever think I would see that. So, I mean, the shift is just crazy. In the nuclear industry world, we keep saying to each other, like, how could data centers have gotten the PR so wrong? So we've been suffering for it for a number of years. So it's a really interesting dynamic. But what will happen and what we're starting to see are states that have not had the economic growth that Virginia has had, particularly with being the data center leader of the world, that have been much poorer from an economic standpoint, much poorer from an education standpoint, are welcoming these companies and are welcoming the industries, and they see it as an economic boom. You look at the investment that the hyperscalers have made in Arkansas, Texas, well, Texas is a more higher economic state, but Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana are really like Wyoming. They're groping for industry to come in and build and get that economic growth. So I think it becomes a bit of a choice in terms of how the area, the state, or the region want to participate and shape the future of the country. And I think it needs to be thought of in those bigger terms. And then just from a global standpoint, China right now, I mean, the amount of energy that they are building is really incomprehensible. It's larger than any other country in the world. Just on the nuclear side, they're building 19 new nuclear reactors for 39 gigawatts of power. Whoever has abundant power, that's where all these investments are going to go, and they see it as a race. Both AI, quantum, medicine, I mean, all kinds of different areas. So totally agree that, we as both from the local level up to the federal level, need to think of it in a broader context.
And your earliest point too, Carol, about the strategic shift, right?
Yeah.
Around this, that's really captured by your example with China, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
How are you going to say
Just a sentence I wanted to add. So I was listening to radio yesterday, and I think our lawmakers knew this for some time, but it became public yesterday that the state of Virginia had a budget surplus of just under 7%. That's about $950 million. So just just under $1 billion. A lot of that is because of the extra collection of income taxes, and I haven't seen the distribution of where that money comes from, but data centers, even though in full-fledged mode, they don't hire a lot of people, but the few people they hire, they're actually higher income people. They still do hire more than 100,000 people a year. So part of that could be actually because of the data centers.
Great point. Bob.
Well, I think, first of all, events like this one are really important to educate the community, the stakeholders, and the public. Because, people scream, and that's what you hear. And this is an opportunity that's unparalleled in my mind. Certainly, probably since the electricity was put into our homes in the original grid in the late 1880s. And maybe even more, because the efficiencies are just so enormous that it allow us to do a lot. And I think, 5 years, 10 years down the road, that we're going to see virtually everyone using daily AI capabilities. So one of the things I think we need to do, not is beyond educating the public, is we need to recognize, and Ann and I have had this discussion a bunch, that no one should, in the near future, should come out of any public or private university, college, community college, without being AI literate. And the universities, particularly the research universities, need to be empowered to find different uses that improve our world. And that needs the backing politically from the people who are paying for the universities, our research centers. But we do, in my mind, that's just critical to the development. And for this community is unparalleled in many respects. We have incredibly interesting companies here with large workforces that will all use AI. We have the federal government, which is huge. We saw a request for proposals, an RFP, about 8 weeks ago from the Department of Defense, asking what was called the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU. They want modular data centers because it's a part of the way they're viewing the world has changed in terms of defense and of war, and they want a lot of them. And those kinds of things are really going to be important. And I know when we talked about the Highway Act, and I went back and looked because I thought I was right, it's actually called the Interstate and Defense Highway Act. And the word defense got in there because as sort of a kicker to get political support. And this is going to be the government, which we are the center of. We have 2 universities within almost walking distance here, are the 2 leading universities in research in the world. And we should, I know they're doing things, but we need to bring them out and incorporate them to what we are doing here today, education, and make sure that we have everybody AI literate.
Great. So I'm going to wrap this up with a final rapid fire question for all of our panelists. But I want to just say, one of the things that we've been thinking of at the universities at Shady Grove in the system is consortium approaches to AI compute and to data center, and using kind of the surgical use of AI so that you can be more efficient in how you use it, but really bringing people together to be very conscious about the decision that we need AI compute power, and we're going to use it for good, and we're going to drive it in a particular way. So if we were to leave a message for Governor Wes Moore, who might be listening now, and he might be here listening, what is the one thing that we could do? I'm going to put on the table a consortium approach to AI compute power, but what is one thing that we could do to really unlock the possibilities of this next generation of electricity and the energy we need? Carol?
Well, I will say I think the Governor Moore's administration has been very positive in looking at the energy issues and the importance of it, and recognize the need for the state of Maryland to develop power generation within the state greater than it currently has. So I give them a lot of credit for that. But it does take the communities getting behind that and to make that happen. I mean, Maryland's been a very difficult state from the standpoint of where it gets its energy from and how much control over it has and how that's impacted the overall prices and stuff like that, and cost to consumers. So it's a little more challenging, I think, than other states are, and they're a little bit, I think, behind the curve in terms of recognizing that. So I give the Moore administration a lot of credit for recognizing it. I think that continuing to look at where there's options to be additive in the energy arena is really important for the state and the area.
Great. Bob?
the state and the governor have already started a process working with Anthropic to bring AI to the state. And I think that's great. We need more of that. We need encouragements, incentives, whatever we can. If we want to be the leader, and it's open for grabs right now, in the deployment of new technologies based on AI, then we need to make sure we have that AI available to a broader stroke. AI is not cheap at all. And to make that available, starting with the universities or so forth, would be truly powerful and would make the state a national leader.
Ali, last word.
Yeah, and I'm from Virginia, so I hope. So maybe a message to my governor too. And she is great. She is fantastic. So as a university professor, I see brilliant talent every day, and if I were to pick one area, I would say would be investing in talent. We often focus on technology, but technology doesn't innovate itself. People do. And in this area, Maryland, DC, Virginia, we have a lot of necessary ingredients. We have, of course, the huge presence of the federal government, the contractors, huge use of data, huge set of generating data. And what I would like to see is government, industry, universities getting together and create seamless pathways for developing talent, retaining talent, or even importing talent. And if we have the right talent, everything else is going to become much easier. Innovation becomes much easier. Economic development is going to be much easier as well. So.
Love that answer. All right, with that, let's give a hand to our panel.
Thank you.
Okay, we're all set? Okay, great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Carol, thank you so much.
All right, great. So really enjoying the conversation today. I think we're hitting on a lot of really interesting ideas, thoughts, and getting a better understanding of where we are with regard to energy. One of the things that I pointed out earlier in my opening comments, we talk very broadly about energy, but really what we're honing in on is electricity.
Yeah.
And thinking and talking about electricity. And so Governor Moore, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you.
Really appreciate it. I know you don't have very much going on right now.
It's quiet.
Right?
Things are quiet,
Quiet out there.
Yeah,
I mean, do you sleep at night?
Not a whole lot, but honestly, I'm the things that are keeping me up more are actually the fact that we actually have, despite all the noise, there's some really good and powerful and exciting things that are happening and moving. So, so we're feeling okay.
Great. All right. So we'll get into some of those. But one thing I wanted to start this out just to get a sense of how fast things are moving. Yeah. Before you were governor, and even when you were running for governor, how much did you talk about energy or think about energy?
It wasn't as much a top of mind thing for a lot of people, and because I think we have seen demand that has just accelerated at such a speed that I don't think we were, and I mean, not just Maryland and the region, but just larger in a collective, we were not thinking about supply in the same way. Where, this thing works when you have supply that can actually meet a demand. And for a while, that actually worked. But the problem was when you saw demand kick up so exponentially, and demand when you're talking about everything from new industry, demand when you're talking about growing population, demand when you're talking about new frameworks and critical infrastructure, but we weren't investing in supply in the same way. We weren't anticipatory in the way we were investing. I was saying earlier, I mean, shoot, I wish 10 years ago, before any of us were in the seats we're in, I wish people were doing more to say, like, how do we anticipate and do more to invest in nuclear? How do we do more to invest in a series of different energy options? What are we doing more to strengthen the grid? I wish those conversations were happening with the same level of vigor that was required. Because I think because those were not happening and everyone was just so focused on What are we doing to create new industries, new focus, new population growth, that we got so excited about demand that we forgot that you also need to match it with supply. And that's why we find ourselves in this situation right now.
How do you, so I'm imagining that you spend a lot of time talking about energy now. Probably
Yeah.
not a day goes by that you're not having a conversation about
Nope,
energy.
not
right?
one,
So,
and I hear from my mom all the time.
all right, well,
Trying to understand why our bills keep going
can't
up.
you fix this bill for me?
Yes, Lord have mercy, mama.
Yeah, I think we all get
But
those
she's,
calls.
but she's right.
Yeah, yeah,
She's
and
right.
and the phenomena you're describing too. We see that across a lot of different infrastructure. We see that in transportation. We see it in water. And so when you think about energy right now and the conversations you're having, and I know there's some examples I want to get into of some of the things that you're doing.
Absolutely.
But how do you step back and think about managing some of those tensions? We need to keep it affordable,
Yeah.
right? I mean, people are under pressure out there right now. People are hurting. But we also need to make massive investments in our infrastructure.
Yeah.
Just to maintain a state of good repair now, I mean, especially when we have 100-degree days.
Yeah.
But then also, too, to anticipate, irregardless of where industries are going, but to anticipate that future need, it's almost an impossible task.
I wouldn't say it's an impossible task, because I would say that we just have to be clear that we have to be able to lead and exist in a world where both affordability and reliability don't have to be competing ideas, right? That if we actually do the work that's required to be able to strengthen the grid, that we do the work that's required to be able to make sure we're clearing the queue, to do the work that's required to make sure that all parties are involved in that, I actually don't think it's an impossible task. I think one of the things that we've got to be able to do is, and one of the reasons why I'm very thankful to be here today, is these conversations, though, can't happen in silos. This cannot be a conversation about industry versus regulators versus government operators versus, we all have to be in the same room. And we all have to be able to understand what are our pressure points. What are the things that we are hearing from our individual constituencies and our individual, your shareholders are different from my shareholders, right? But we need to be able to make sure that we understand what everyone is saying and that we're all speaking the same language. Because I actually do think that there are very real, rational asks that are coming from the various sides that we can come to an important agreement on. And I think it's also then done in context where, for example, when I'm having conversations, I'm actually in 2 weeks I'll become the new chair of the National Governors Association. And so I'll be now the chair. Well, thank you. The other governors who elected me, they're like, congratulations and our condolences, trying to get that, corral up the nation's 50 governors, Democrat and Republican on this thing. But I can tell you, one of the hottest issues of every single governor right now is energy. Every governor is wrestling with this and trying to understand, because also the way that we all operate is going to be unique and different, right? I mean, the energy needs, but also the energy opportunities for Oklahoma are very different than for Maryland. The energy needs and opportunities for Maine are very different than Montana. So for all of us, and part of the reason we can have the conversations that we're having as governors is because we're all at the same table and we're discussing it. I'm hearing from all these other governors like, I didn't know you guys had that as an option. We don't in Maryland. But when I'm talking to people about things like, it's very difficult having a conversation about offshore wind with the governor of Iowa, right? So it's but it's important that we're all collectively there. And communicating about what are the unique assets that we have. And I think the thing that we're all pushing for, though, is that for all of us, since every single one of us involved in some type of regional collaborative, in the case of us, it's the it's PJM, and it's the 13 states that are connected with PJM. The simple ask that we have, that you have other states have in their own regional collaboratives, is we just want to make sure that we have a seat at the table. And we just want to make sure we're involved in the conversations, because every single decision that's going to be made, whether it's PJM or FERC, it is going to have a direct impact that we are going to hear every single day when we're out in our communities and out in our neighborhoods. And so, to go back, I actually think that this does not have to be an impossible task. It will become impossible if we all just kind of remain in silos in the way we're having these conversations.
Well, and that's one of the hardest things, and we see it in our region a lot too, regional fragmentation, particularly with DC, Virginia, Maryland, you know, and the incentives aren't always aligned.
Yeah.
Right, you know, on energy and other things.
Yeah.
So how do you think about it, and even just, you know, and even within PJM and you know, with your counterparts in DC and Virginia, how are you thinking about this, and where are the opportunities where we can make progress on these issues? Because it affects all of us. I'll give you an example. We're involved in the Valley Link transmission project. A lot of opposition out there to that, and it's growing. But we need it at the same time, and so we've got to figure out how to balance that. Phase 1 is Virginia, phase 2 comes into Maryland. You know, and so thinking through that. So how do you think about that? How do you approach it? And then how should us in the business community also support that? Because you're right, if we're not all at the table, we're not going to get the solutions that we really need.
Correct, and listen, and I think, and you're absolutely right that we're all kind of interconnected in that way. You know, when I'm out selling Maryland, and for all of us as the nation's governors, we are all deeply competitive animals by our nature. But frankly, when I'm out selling Maryland, I'm not just selling Maryland, I'm selling the DMV, right? I'm selling the access that you're going to get from DC and Virginia as well. And you know who's also doing that? The governor of Virginia. You know who's also doing that? The mayor of Washington, D.C. And so we are very much connected in that way, but we also do understand that we're talking about energy demands and needs that are real. When we're talking about, you know, probably an additional 32 gigawatts by the end of the decade. Like, this is real. The amount of energy needs, particularly when you're looking at the industries that we want to make sure that we are winning and dominating in. Like, we are focused that we need to dominate when it comes to things like life sciences. We need to dominate when it comes to things like IT, and that includes how we're thinking about cyber, how we're thinking about quantum, all these other things, that there's no reason that there should be any other state that's even in our ballpark as Maryland. It also includes things like aerospace and defense, right? These are all groupings and these are all technologies that we think are going to be very important to our long-term economic growth, but also every single one of them require energy, every one of them. And so we have to make sure that we are then working together to fulfill that need. Now, I think that one thing that has to happen, though, is there has to be a measure of coordination in terms of what are the guardrails and the guidelines that are being laid out when it comes to our corporate partnerships. You know, for example, I take a look at things like data centers as one example, and particularly the hyperscalers in that.
Right.
Where, you know, data centers are not new. Right? There were 40 to 50 data centers in Maryland before I became the governor, before I even learned what a data center even was, right? So it's not a new thing. Do I wish that before there were different ways that people would have approached data centers? I do. And not just in Maryland, but like, for example, if you look at where the data center capital of the world is, Northern Virginia, the highest cluster of data centers. Do I think that do I wish they had a different type of approach to it? I do. Because I don't think that we would be having a lot of these challenges now had there been a different type of approach and had the data centers not been allowed to basically write their own rules, right? So I think, but what do we do about it now? What we do about it now is we make sure that we have very clear guidelines as to what are the type of projects that we think and that I think are important for us to be able to move forward on. So, for example, that you must bring your own energy, you must pay for your own infrastructure improvements, and that taxpayers cannot be just foot the bill for it. You must be able to produce and provide your own energy and pay for your own energy, right? That you have to be able to think about how are you hiring local workers and making sure that local communities are involved and that local communities actually have voice in that. And that we have to make sure that we're going by and advising by environmental concerns and environmental conditions. If we do those things, we have to be clear that, yes, we have to be able to think about critical infrastructure and building a critical infrastructure, particularly if we want to win in these industries that we care about. But we have to make sure that we are then at the table writing the rules and understanding that local jurisdictions and basic infrastructure have to be a part of that, and that it just can't be, well, do whatever you want to do because we are excited about it. And so that's where the coordination, I think, does matter, because we're all, you know, if a data center goes up in Virginia or in Pennsylvania, Maryland is going to pay for it. The same thing about a data center goes up in Maryland, Virginia is going to pay for it. So there has to be coordination as to how we're thinking about this, and there have to be high bars and guidelines as to what are the expectations that we're then going to have as we're moving forward into this new technologies.
And so, and I appreciate that. And in order to move this forward, things are moving faster than ever.
Yes.
It's really hard to stay out in front of this, particularly with advances in AI and how we're applying that, the demands and the needs, right? I mean, it's really hard to forecast and get out in front of that. How is it that we need to work together to modernize the process for getting these things done?
Yeah.
So for example, just writ large, permitting.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's the one thing we hear all the time is that, well, you can't get the permit. You know, you can't get the approvals, you can't go. And so agree bringing in these data centers and having the power, but they've got to be able to make that happen.
Yeah.
Right? So how can we work on those types of issues? I mean, it's because it's a complicated system between legislators, regulators, utilities,
Yeah.
you know, and all the various pieces. You know, where can we streamline some of that?
And it's complicated to your point because there are multiple layers to it, right?
Sure.
It's like when we're talking about for example, when you're talking about government, you're not just talking about, federal, you're talking about state, you're talking about local. It's multiple layers to this. And then it's even the same thing on the regulator front as well. So there's a few things that I think are going to be really important. I think there has to be permitting and regulatory reform when we're thinking about these assets. And I would say both on the state side and also on the regulator side, and I'll talk about that. I'll talk about the regulator side in a second. But partially it's because we have rules and regulations that frankly were not made for a moment like this. So we're still having guidelines that were built in a century that we no longer exist in. We still have permitting that was laid out before we had new technologies, faster technologies to be able to process and to be able to streamline. And so I think there has to be an updating in the way. Like we need to have a reboot and actually say, what does the regulatory guidelines look like for a 21st century? What does a regulatory guideline look like for new industries that we want to be able to support? Because frankly, a lot of these things are antiquated, which means by definition, they are going to be slow. I also, though, think that that's not just something that needs to happen on a state side. Regulators need to do the same thing. And and it's been very public, but the level of frustration that I have on things like the interconnection queue, the frustration that I have on how difficult it is to get projects greenlit, the frustration that I have that oftentimes a lot of these energy projects are seen through an ideological lens and not through a data-driven lens, is deeply frustrating. Where, I mean, listen, part of the reason, and so for example, the reason that I say, and again, I am an all of the above energy approach type of person, where I'm like, I do want to make sure that we are focusing on nuclear, that nuclear is a clean energy technology, and I think it's one that needs to be supported, that I understand the why, and like natural gas is part of the equation right now, and there is not a scenario where you say, like, we're just going to cut that from a scenario and think you're going to get to a long-term conclusion. But do you know the reason that I'm also remarkably bullish on things like solar and wind and battery storage and transmission reform is this is stuff that is quick and cheap and accessible, and particularly for the state of Maryland, a place where we can move to actually help to generate more in-state energy options, which is what I want to do, because right now, the majority of the energy in Maryland is imported. I don't like that. I want to generate more energy in Maryland. And so that means I want to go with the fastest and the cleanest and the cheapest way to be able to make that happen. The challenge that we're seeing, and again, so for example, when we're talking about things like new data centers, you can say, okay, we're going to need energy assets for data centers that are going to be built. Those things will be ready to go in 2 years. You can say, okay, well, let's do a measure of natural gas, et cetera. The problem is that could take up to a decade. Same as nuclear. I wish those decisions were made a decade ago, but they weren't. So here's what we then have to do. We need to focus on the things that can bring forward a strengthening of the grid now. We also need partners on the regulatory side that can speed these up. And frankly, we need partners on the federal side that stops looking at this like it's an ideology. That stops looking at it like, well, we don't believe, in solar or wind or da-da-da, not because of data, but because of an ideology. We need to have all of the assets, all of them on the table, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get to what we mentioned before, which is making sure that affordability and reliability do not have to be competing ideas. If you start constraining supply, if you start constraining options, particularly from an ideological basis, then guess what? You will have a battle between affordability and reliability.
Do you have any tips for us? Because we frequently rely on data arguments when we go up against ideology, and we don't always prevail.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was going to ask you if any tips. I have found that the thing I hate. I mean, again, I am not from this world. This is the first elected office I ever ran for in my life. I do not come from this political background. I don't come from a political family. I don't come from this world. I've really found that the thing I hate most about politics is politics. It is exhausting. It really is, because oftentimes it doesn't allow people to actually talk about data and numbers.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we are going to have essentially around, a 32 gigawatt increase in need by 2030, that's not an ideology, that's data. Those are numbers. The fact that we are now looking at very real increases in not just need, but we are going to run into a very real problem when it comes to basic reliability. That is not an ideology. That is data. And the thing I love about numbers and data is they don't have an opinion. Mm-hmm. They don't have a political party. They are numbers, right? And so I would love advice from you all how to handle it, because it's very frustrating. But the thing I would say is this. And I think what the ask is, and where I think we can actually do some, continue to do good work is one, how do we think about our advocacy and our push to make sure that if we are going to be serious about saying we want all energy options to be on the table and to have a chance to be greenlit and streamlined, that if we have a collective voice on that, that will matter to decision makers. Mm-hmm. When they don't feel like they are being pit one against another, or when they don't feel like, okay, well, of course Wes Moore would say that, he's da-da-da-da, or when they feel like, no, it's just data, guys, then there are different decisions that are made and people will listen. I think also even things like, I think even flexibility on usage, because one thing that we are seeing and that we are running into, even if you look at PJM, there's still about an 18 gigawatt flexibility in terms of how we're thinking about usage. Like that's something that we want to make sure that private sector partners are actually involved inside of that work and being in conversation with us about that, because we do think that's going to help to relieve strain on the grid, but also at the same time help to provide access and pathways for more reliable options to be able to be greenlit. And then I think the third piece that we're going to have to do is there has to be a larger education of the public about this that is not happening. That truthfully, if it does not happen, you will not just lose the plot. You will very quickly find yourself at the end of on the wrong end of the spear on this. When I am, to your point, I probably hear about this issue as much as now anything else.
Okay. Yeah.
And I wasn't kidding when I'm like, when my mom is like, I don't understand how I'm spending hundreds of dollars more for something that it's the same usage that I had from before.
Right.
And that's now happened in the process of 18 months. How do I explain that to my mom? Right? We have got to be able to have a sober and a focused conversation with a public, because the anger is real. They do not understand what is happening. The misinformation campaign is so real. You could spend half your day just being like, where did you hear that? Or that's not true. But it doesn't matter, because the misinformation campaigns are real around this. And so there has to be a better way of being able to communicate what is happening, move with a sense of urgency to be able to address it, and then turn around and say, now how do we think about both for a short term and for a long term perspective, making sure that we can have affordability and reliability that is real for the people in our for our constituents, for both of our constituents.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work to do here, and it's a very long term. Actually, though, we talked a little bit earlier, and Tyler had mentioned too, you do have a couple of examples in Maryland of things that you did, particularly in this past legislative session.
Yeah.
There were pretty big breakthroughs. Could you tell us a little bit about that from your perspective?
Yeah.
And then how do you build on that? So what are you looking for next, and how do we move that forward? Because we have to anchor this, and we have to continue building it over time.
Yes.
There is no quick fix.
There is no quick fix, and there is no quick fix. There's no singular fix, and there's no fix that's going to come from one specific sector or one specific industry. The only thing that's going to make sense is one that's collective. Mm-hmm. The only thing. And so we're very thankful and proud of the work that we were able to do together with community leaders, with corporate leaders, et cetera, where I feel like Maryland has made as much progress on these issues as you've seen with any other state. Again, still more work to do, but I think we're able to help to strike a good balance of saying that, we have to make sure we're doing more to introduce more assets onto the grid and strengthen the grid, and we have to make sure we're giving some pressure relief to the people of our individual jurisdictions. And so if you look at what was able to happen with our, Utility Relief Act, we were able to then give back, put money back in the people of our state's pockets, upwards of $300 million that went back into the pockets of the people of the state of Maryland for utility relief. We were able to work on being able to help do permitting reform and streamline new projects and making sure that we're getting them, helping to get them online. We were able to, I was very thankful that, I led a bipartisan group of governors to the White House to go urge PJM reform and urge for a cap and for a collar. And we were able to not just get that accepted. We actually asked for 2 years, but we got that price cap and collar that's now going to go to the end of the decade, which is going to save the American people around $27 billion that otherwise would have then just gotten added on to a tab when it comes to energy assets. But the point around all that is this is all things we had to do together, right? The work that we did with the White House to be able to get PJM to make those adjustments, those were done with Democratic and Republican governors. The work that happened with the Utility Relief Act inside of Maryland, that happened both with legislative partners and corporate partners. It's the only way that we're going to be able to both address how can we provide more assets and provide more gigawatt support and giving people some direct relief right now, so you do not lose the plot in the meantime.
Yeah, so I was talking about this conversation with my daughter, and so she has a question for you. She's
Love
10, she's an avid AI user, and she wants to know if you had a magic wand, what would you do with it on this issue?
On AI?
Well, on AI, on data centers, on energy. In the ideal world, what would you be looking for? Because sometimes it's interesting to think about what's sort of the ideal, and then what do we have to do to get there?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think too often we get trapped in our own current place.
Yeah.
And so we're never really aspiring to what the outcome should be. Mm-hmm. We keep just building on what it shouldn't be in some respects.
That's right.
So how would we change that dynamic?
Yeah.
What would you do to do that? And then how is it that we could support you in that effort? We'd be very interested in that.
Yeah. Well, if I really had a magic wand, I'd go back a decade ago. Because I think there's...
That's good.
Well, and I'll start there, but if the magic wand wasn't that powerful, if it wasn't an AI-powered magic wand, because here's the thing, and I'll say this about AI and technologies. I'm incredibly bullish about what I think could be that the opportunity this can uphold. I think that when you think about the prospects of things like AI, I think this could revolutionize healthcare. I think it could revolutionize education. I think it could revolutionize public safety, right? I think that there is a whole lot that can be generated from a powerful, productive future around AI. I mean, I look right now, for example, the state of Maryland is utilizing AI through all of our state agencies. If you look at what we've done we have something called Sunbucks, which is essentially EBT. It's summer food for kids. We're utilizing AI through all of our Sunbucks initiatives right now. And right now, during this summer, we will have close to 750,000 children who will receive summer food assistance. And we're doing it through AI. These are kids because they know during the school year that you will get your breakfast, you will get your lunch, you will get your additional supports. But the question has always been, but what happens during the summer for these kids? What do they do then? And we are utilizing these technologies and working with community organizations to make sure that we are better supporting our children to make sure that they are not starving simply because it is the summer, right? That's a powerful usage of these kind of tools. But I also do understand that for many people in our society, when they think about these things, when they think about AI, they think like Will Smith movies. And they think the thing that's going to take my job. And so we have to do a better job of bringing people along on this and making sure that we are understanding what type of guardrails exist, but also it's not just us. It's not just me in competition with the governor of Virginia or a governor of Wisconsin or a governor of Nevada. It's in competition with China. It's in competition with Brazil. It's in competition with India, with all these other nations around the world. Because this is not just a quote unquote American technology. And so if I were to pursue, have a magic wand around this, here's what I would do. I would say on the energy that is required and necessary, that we would get our regional grid operators to start green lighting these projects faster and to be able to work with individual governors to be able to say, what are the energy assets that you specifically need and you specifically could benefit from? And then giving us more flexibility to be able to do that. Because energy is never going to be a one-size-fits-all in this country. It's just not. We have different assets in different parts of the country. But we've got to start green lighting these things and stop making it so that every time there's a change in administration, it also means there's a change in energy policy. That every time we get someone new in a state house or every time you get someone new in the White House, that now you basically have to say, well, I guess we're going to have to start from scratch. Because you know who that doesn't work with either? The energy producers. It doesn't work for the solar companies or the wind companies or the natural gas companies or the nuclear companies or anyone else who are saying, I really want to invest, but I have no idea what's going to happen in 2 years. And none of these projects are quick. The fact that we had projects on board in Maryland that frankly were greenlit before I got there, right? That were good projects. That when I came on board, I said, you know what? There is no reason to have a different change on certain of these assets because these were things that uniquely could benefit Maryland. But then when a federal administration comes on board and kills it, on the second day, a project that has been on board for 10 years, that's now finally ready to start producing the kind of supports and grid management that we need. That is insanity. And it is no way to run a country or a larger grid infrastructure, particularly if we plan on winning against other countries. Because they're not doing that. They're looking at us and laughing. And so, sorry for the long answer.
That's good.
If I had a magic wand, we need to be committed to winning.
Yeah.
We've got to be committed to winning.
That needs to be the outcome.
Like, period.
Yeah.
Do you want to win or not?
Yeah.
And if you want to play political games and if you want to do partisan games, then have at it. But then you're not committed to winning. I'm committed to winning. Whatever needs to be done to do that. And I just think that all of our policies need to have a measure of consistency and longevity and durability. That right now, when you think about energy policy inside this country, it does not have that. And that fits and starts stuff is not helpful. And frankly, if we do not address this, the people will not forgive us, and frankly, they shouldn't.
My daughter's going to be thrilled that I got you to say magic wand.
Yes!
Yeah, and we're right there with you. I mean, businesses are organized around success and winning, and so we'll continue to partner with you and work
Just
with you.
predictability.
And do, right, predictability.
Just
But
predictability.
also, anticipating the needs are going to be huge. And how do we get out in front of those?
And only growing.
And I know we're coming up on time a little bit, but this is one of so many different issues that you're grappling with all the time. Talk to us a little bit about leadership. So, as you're going through day to day, who are one or two leaders, either current or in history, that you very much admire? And what about them do you take with you into these battles and conversations?
A person who I just have such a deep level of admiration for, and I think about this in context of the 250 celebration of this country. It's a deep understanding that this country really still does remain the greatest experiment in world history. When the United States was founded, there was nothing like it before. And there really has been nothing like it since in this way. A place where you can welcome people from, all over the world with just a simple ask saying, if you're willing to sacrifice and serve and give your talents and your treasures to make this country better, that this could be a country that could exceed even your wildest of dreams. But I also know that the history of this country is complex. But I think about the people who were willing to fight for a hope of the country, even when they knew they might not see it themselves. I talk about how my definition of patriotism is not just simply whole cart saying everything that happened in our history was good. But your definition of patriotism is saying, but I'm willing to do the work to make sure that our future becomes something where we are creating a more perfect union with every generation. And I think about, as I oftentimes will think about Marylanders, and I think about Harriet Tubman, where I just think that Harriet Tubman was maybe the most fascinating and extraordinarily brave human beings in the history of this world. Where this is a woman who figured out a way and managed to find an escape to her own freedom. Born in the Eastern Shore, enslaved there, and figured out a way to navigate a path to Pennsylvania, where she got her freedom. And no one would have blamed her if she just stayed there. If she was like, you know what, I'm good. I'm never going back there. But she very much had a philosophy that until everyone is free, no one is free. And she went back again and again, bringing people through the Underground Railroad, becoming the greatest conductor in the history of the Underground Railroad, risking her life every single time, being tracked by dogs and people with guns, dodging snakes, every danger you could possibly imagine, but just with this unshakable faith in God and this unshakable faith in humanity. I mean, literally to the point, she went back once to go get her husband, who she found out when she got back had actually taken another wife, and still tried to get him to his freedom. I'm like, you are a much better person than I am. But I think about her power and her strength. And as complicated as these times are, and as the level of division that we have within this country, it is so self-destructive. But I think about what a hypothetical conversation would be like with Harriet Tubman, explaining to her how difficult my day was. And then looking at her face when I said that.
Yeah, hold my beer.
Hold my beer. So I just think that, listen, this country's seen some really difficult moments in its past. This country has overcome, the history of this country is both powerful and deeply painful. And I just think that there's just been two things that's ever gotten us through every complicated thing this country's had to deal with. It's God's grace and moral leadership. That's it. That's all that's ever gotten us through the most complicated times in our country's history. And I pray for God's grace. And I pray that we can get some moral leadership. Because I just think that if we can do that, we can stay focused on what are the things we have to do to preserve our future. How do we stay focused on winning? And how do we know that in order to win, you're going to need everybody and not just some people? Then I think we're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I would agree. As we wrap up here, anything else that you want to leave us with or share with us about how you're thinking, and in anything, but generally around energy and electricity, the future of Maryland, our region, and how should we be thinking about what comes next? Well, anything that we left out here?
Yeah, well, one thing, and I do want to make sure I touch on and reemphasize is these are regional conversations. There is no Maryland energy conversation because that's not how energy works, right? There is no Virginia energy conversation. There's no DC energy conversation. There's no Pennsylvania. It's like, because all of this is interconnected and intertwined. And so I just think that the more we can make sure that these things are happening in collaboration with one another, it matters. And I get that it's great political fodder to say, well, this is not right, or this state has not done this, or this administration has not done this, or this party, or whatever. And it's cute and it works during election years, I guess. But it's not going to get us to the solution that we need. That all of these things are intertwined. And our states are going to be different, both in terms of need, in terms of assets. We know that Pennsylvania will have different energy assets because of its geography and topography than are in Virginia. We know that that oftentimes you have some states that are producers, you have some states that are more transmission states, you have some states that are more generators and need states, but that we're all on the same grid. So all these conversations become very interconnected. And they're not just interconnected when it comes to our state partners. They are very interconnected when it comes to our private sector partners as well. I want for our private sector to succeed. I want for our businesses to grow. I want for our corporations to choose Maryland, right? But I also know that in order for those things to happen, that there has to be a measure of collaboration that does become necessary and required. I want to make sure that the people of our state are also rooting for the success of our businesses and our entities, et cetera, and don't see their success as something that ends up hurting the people of the state. And so, but all these things, I think it just becomes incredibly important that there's a measure of honesty, alignment, guardrails, but then a real collaborative focus as to what are the things that we have to do, what are the things we have to stop doing in order to make it real.
Awesome, that's great. Thank you so much. Melanie, thank you so much for hosting us today.
Yes,
really
thank
do
you.
appreciate it with you and your team, the other panelists and folks. And folks, thank you very much for joining us. A lot more to talk about on this. We'll be talking more about it. As we get ready for next year, things that we can do to help and support you in your efforts.
Absolutely.
We'll connect on that.
Definitely.
And just very much appreciate your time. And we'll keep at it.
We'll keep at it.
Thank you
I
very much.
appreciate you too.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thank y'all. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You do this more than